Good evening. It's time to slow everything down. Your thoughts, your breath, even the tiny muscles in your face. Let it all begin to soften now. There's no need to focus. No need to understand every word. Just let the sound of this voice carry you. Tonight, we're going to explore something quiet, something not loud, not obvious, but powerful. Manipulation doesn't always come with shouting. It doesn't always come with anger or violence. Sometimes it comes in silence, and a look, a pause, a sentence so calm, you barely notice how deeply it affects you. Dark psychology is the study of how people influence others, quietly, subtly, sometimes without saying much at all. And the most dangerous manipulators often speak the softest. They use charm, they use kindness, they use calmness to create control. So now, let your mind drift open. Let the room grow still. You're safe here. There's nothing to fear, except maybe how words can change everything. Welcome to Dark Psychology for Sleep. Not every prison has bars, and not every weapon makes a sound. Sometimes control is quiet. It doesn't yell. It doesn't threaten. It suggests. It whispers. It lingers. And before you realize what's happening, you're moving differently, thinking differently. You're reacting, but not to your own thoughts. You are reacting to someone else's design. That is manipulation. It's not always cruel, not always dramatic. In fact, the most powerful kind of manipulation is soft. It feels like guidance. It feels like care. It feels like love. But love doesn't bend your will. Love doesn't make you disappear. Manipulation does. Imagine this. You're sitting in a room. You speak your mind. And the person across from you doesn't argue, doesn't raise their voice. They just smile, or they frown, or they go silent. And suddenly, without realizing it, you begin to change your words. You shift your tone, you shrink a little, you reshape yourself. Around their silence, that is manipulation. Not in the noise, but in the silence between your words. Manipulation is not a single moment, it's a pattern. It doesn't force, it nudges. It doesn't control you directly. It makes you control yourself. You begin to censor your feelings, doubt your memories, apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You are being moved by invisible strings, and you may not even see who's holding them. The manipulator doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they hold your hand. Sometimes they say they care, and maybe they do, but their care has a cost, their love. Demands shape, your shape, and you will begin to bend. Imagine this. You are sitting across from someone you trust. A friend, a partner, a parent, a teacher, a boss. They don't yell. They don't threaten. Instead, they sigh. They say, I just thought you were different. Or, I guess I was wrong about you. Or they say nothing at all. They just look disappointed. And it stings. It stings more than anger, more than words. And somehow, without force, without pressure, you start to feel guilty. You begin to question yourself. You start wondering if you are, in fact, wrong. And before long, you change. You compromise, not because they asked, not because they demanded, but because you felt it was safer to shift than to face that look again. That is manipulation. It is not always done with malice, but it always causes imbalance. It is the subtle redirection of your emotions. It is the rearranging of your boundaries. It is invisible architecture built inside your mind. Unlike any architecture, it has structure, patterns, a method. doubt in your memory, doubt in your emotions, doubt in your sense of self. Manipulators are experts in weaving uncertainty into the ordinary. They don't scream, "You are wrong." They simply plant a quiet seed. Are you sure that happened that way? Maybe you misunderstood. You tend to overreact sometimes. And so you pause. You scan your memory. You rewind your emotional film. And suddenly, the certainty you had starts to slip. You begin to lean on them for interpretation. They become your mirror, your compass, your truth. But what if the mirror is warped? What if the compass always points to where they want you to go? It is not a storm, it is erosion. Bit by bit, it chips away at your confidence, your clarity, your instinct, until you are no longer sure if your thoughts are your own. This erosion is often dressed in concern. I'm only telling you this because I care. I just want what's best for you. But underneath those words is a message. I know better than you. You cannot trust your own judgment. And so you start to believe that. You internalize it. And the more you believe it, the easier it becomes for someone else to steer you. But to manipulators, it is more than that. It is a blade, a cage, a key. They use words not just to communicate, but to confuse, to blur the line between logic and emotion, to shift blame, to create guilt, to install loyalty. Words like always, never, after everything I've done for you. These phrases are not innocent, they are weighted, designed to trigger response, to create a debt you never signed up for. You begin to explain yourself, to over-explain, to walk on eggshells. This is not connection. This is control. Not physical, always, but emotional. Manipulators will often weaken your outside sources of clarity. Your friends don't understand us. Your family always tries to come between us. And then, when you're isolated, their voice becomes the loudest, and eventually the only one. Not always fear of violence. Sometimes it is fear of silence, fear of the cold shoulder, fear of being misunderstood, of disappointing them, of losing the relationship. This fear leads you to anticipate their needs before your own, to edit your words before you speak, to compromise even when it hurts. Manipulators wear masks not made of plastic or cloth, but of charm, of calm, of care. They appear helpful, thoughtful, understanding. Sometimes they are the friendliest person in the room. They laugh easily. They remember small things about you. They give gifts, but behind that is strategy, not always evil, but always calculated. They build trust, because trust makes you open. And when you're open, you're easier to influence. They study you, your tone, your fears, your desires, your doubts. They do not need power over everyone, just over you. Manipulators are quiet observers. They listen closely, but not always to understand. They listen to learn how to use your words later, to find the cracks in your confidence. You said you hate being alone. You told me once that your parents never supported you. They file these things away, not for comfort, but for leverage. The manipulator learns what you love, then holds it like a hostage. They learn what you fear, and they become the one who can remove it. They are not loud, not aggressive. They are thoughtful, but their attention is sharp, sharper than you think. They don't just see who you are, they see how to move you, and they wait for the moment. Manipulators adapt. They change who they are to match who you need them to be. If you are gentle, they are soft. If you are strong, they admire your strength. If you are unsure, they offer clarity. They mirror your tone, your rhythm, your values. You feel seen. You feel understood. But what you really feel is yourself reflected back at you, and that creates connection. But a connection made of illusion, not of their truth, but of yours. They do not reveal themselves fully, only what is useful, only what keeps them close. Manipulators are storytellers. They shape the truth like clay, stretch it, twist it, but rarely do they lie outright. They change the context, they leave things out, they add color. They shift the focus, and the story sounds convincing, because it is partly true, and that is enough to make you believe all of it. They become the hero of the story, the misunderstood one, the only one who truly cares. They control the narrative, and when they control the narrative, they control the way you see the world. Manipulators often play the victim. They say things like, "I guess I can't do anything right. You're just like everyone else. I was only trying to help." Suddenly, you are the aggressor. They are the wounded one. You feel guilty. You question your anger. You apologize, even if they are the ones who hurt you. This is emotional reversal, a tactic of control. They use your empathy against you. And if you care deeply, you begin to shrink, to stay silent, to take the blame. They do not win by force. They win by turning your heart against itself. Gaslighting is a signature tool of manipulation. It begins subtly, a disagreement over details, a correction of memory. Then it grows. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. You begin to doubt your memory, then your perception, then your mind. Gaslighting makes you question reality. You become dependent on the manipulator to confirm what is true. And when they control your truth, they control your choices. You are no longer grounded. You are floating in uncertainty, and they hold the rope. Manipulators use reinforcement like trainers with animals. They reward behavior they like. They punish behavior they don't, but not with obvious rewards or clear punishments. Sometimes the reward is affection or approval or attention. Sometimes the punishment is silence, distance, coldness. You learn quickly what pleases them, and you adjust. Not because you want to, but because it becomes easier than losing their warmth. They train you without commands, and you begin to train yourself. Leaving a manipulator is difficult, not because you can't, but because they make you feel like you shouldn't. They say, "I can't live without you. You'll regret this. No one else will understand you like I do." Or worse, they cry, they collapse. They threaten to hurt themselves. And suddenly, their pain becomes your responsibility. This is not love. This is emotional hostage-taking. It binds you not through affection, but through obligation. You stay not because you feel safe, but because leaving feels dangerous. Not all manipulators are the same. Some are calculated. Some are wounded. Some know what they are doing. Others do not. But the impact is often the same. Manipulation doesn't need intention. It only needs effect. If your sense of self has begun to erode, if your voice feels smaller, if your truth has become blurry, then something is shaping you. Someone is shaping you. And that shaping is the heart of manipulation. Now that we understand the anatomy of the manipulator, we can begin to name the pieces, to recognize the patterns, to reclaim what was bent, not with anger, but with awareness, not with fear, but with clarity. Because once we see the mask, it loses its power, and we begin to return to ourselves, to the place where we choose, quietly, freely, on our own terms. Why me? It's the question that comes after the confusion, after the hurt, After the silence has settled in, why was I the one they chose? What made me a target? The truth is not because you are weak or broken or foolish. It is often the opposite. You were chosen because of your strengths, because of your light. Manipulators don't seek emptiness, they seek fullness. They are drawn to people who feel deeply, who care sincerely, who try to understand others. You were not chosen because something is wrong with you. You were chosen because so much is right that light can be bent, and your empathy can be weaponized. Empaths feel everything: joy, pain, fear, love, not just their own, but others too. They absorb emotion, carry burdens. They want to fix things. They want to make it better. This is a beautiful quality, but also a doorway. Manipulators see this, and they step through it. They create situations where your empathy works against you. They frame their suffering as your fault. They cry when you try to set boundaries. And you hesitate because you care, but this care is being redirected from compassion to control. Some people give easily: time, energy, love, forgiveness. They give without expecting much in return. Because giving feels good, feels right. Manipulators know this. And they take, and take, and take. At first, you don't notice, because giving is natural for you, but over time, you begin to feel drained, exhausted, confused. You wonder why the connection feels so heavy. The answer is simple. You are carrying both sides, their needs and your own. But the manipulator never says thank you. They only say, you should have done more, and so you do until there's nothing left. Segment 4. The achiever manipulators are drawn to achievers. People with drive, with vision, with dreams. Because achievers are used to striving, to working hard, to proving themselves. The manipulator doesn't need to force them. They simply create a moving target. You're not doing enough. You disappointed me. And the achiever responds with effort. More doing, more fixing, trying to earn approval. That never truly arrives. It's a cycle of performance, of chasing something just out of reach. Manipulators know if you already work hard for success, you'll work harder for love, even when it isn't real. Manipulators are drawn to achievers, people with drive, with vision, with dreams, because achievers are used to striving, to working hard, to proving themselves. The manipulator doesn't need to force them. They simply create a moving target. You're not doing enough. You disappointed me. And the achiever responds with effort, more doing, more fixing, trying to earn approval. That never truly arrives. It's a cycle of performance, of chasing something just out of reach. Manipulators know if you already work hard for success, you'll work harder for love, even when it isn't real. Segment 5. The doubter. Some people were raised in uncertainty, in households where love was conditional, where approval was unpredictable. They learned to doubt their worth, to second-guess their feelings. Manipulators recognize this and they reinforce it. They say, you're too sensitive, you're lucky I put up with you. And because you already doubt yourself, it's easier to believe them. They don't create your insecurity, they deepen it, they anchor it. And once you look to them for truth, they hold the pen. They begin to write your story, one where you are always wrong, and they are always right. Loyalty is powerful, it's rare, it's beautiful. But in the hands of a manipulator, it becomes a trap. Loyal people stay. They endure. They fight for the connection. Even when it's hurting them, the manipulator says, if you leave, you're selfish. After everything I've done, and the loyal one stays and stays. Because loyalty is not just about love, it's about identity. And leaving feels like betrayal. Not of them, but of yourself. So you remain. Even when it costs you peace, idealists see what could be, they see potential, possibility, hope. They believe people can change, grow, become better. This makes them generous, forgiving, open, but it also makes them targets. Manipulators show glimpses of change. They promise, they almost do better, and the idealist holds on because they don't fall in love with the manipulator. They fall in love with the version that doesn't exist yet, and they wait, and they believe, until the waiting becomes a cage. Segment 8. The lonely loneliness is quiet but powerful. It makes people reach, compromise, hope faster than they should. Manipulators move fast. They offer attention, connection, intensity, and when you've been lonely ... it feels like water after thirst, but not all water is clean. And what began as comfort ... day becomes dependency. Now, the fear of being alone becomes greater than the fear of being controlled. And that fear keeps you close. Sometimes it feels like something is pulling you back. You think you've moved on, you've seen the truth, you know the harm, but you still feel the pull, the urge to explain, to return, to fix. Why? Because of the emotional hooks. Little pieces left behind, planted carefully to tether you. Even when the door is closed, the connection echoes. It whispers, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they'll change. That whisper is not yours. It is their voice, still living in your head. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools of manipulation. It turns kindness into a weapon. You say no. They look hurt. You speak up. They say, I was only trying to help. You leave. They fall apart. Suddenly, your boundaries become cruelty. Your needs become selfish. You question, am I the problem? But guilt is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes it is a sign of conditioning, a hook planted deep, to make you doubt your truth and prioritize theirs. Sometimes it feels like something is pulling you back. You think you've moved on, you've seen the truth, you know the harm, but you still feel the pull, the urge to explain, to return, to fix. Why? Because of the emotional hooks. Little pieces left behind, planted carefully to tether you. Even when the door is closed, the connection echoes. It whispers, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they'll change. That whisper is not yours. It is their voice, still living in your head. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools of manipulation. It turns kindness into a weapon. You say no. They look hurt. You speak up. They say, I was only trying to help. You leave. They fall apart. Suddenly, your boundaries become cruelty. Your needs become selfish. You question, am I the problem? But guilt is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes it is a sign of conditioning, a hook planted deep, to make you doubt your truth and prioritize theirs. Hope is beautiful, but it can be a trap. When someone shows a glimpse of change, you believe. When they apologize with tears, you soften. When they tell you, I'm working on it, you wait. But change is not a moment. It is a pattern, a practice. One kind word does not erase 10 wounds. One promise does not undo months of silence. Hope becomes a trap when it asks you to stay in pain. Segment 4. The loop of apologies. Apologies can be healing. But when used by manipulators, they are part of the cycle. Hurt, apologize, repeat. I didn't mean it. It won't happen again. You know how I get when I'm stressed? They apologize not to change, but to reset, to calm you, to keep you. It's not the apology that matters, it's what follows. If the same pain keeps repeating, then the apology was not an end. It was a pause, a trick. To keep the game going, manipulators make you feel chosen. I've never felt this way before. You're the only one who gets me. It feels rare, sacred, but that specialness comes with a price. Because if you are the only one who understands them, then who are you to walk away? If you are their lifeline, then leaving feels like betrayal. This is not love, it is pressure, wrapped in flattery. True connection should never make you feel trapped. Even in golden chains, you'll never find someone like me. No one will love you the way I do. This is fear dressed as truth. It narrows your vision. It tells you there is nothing better, nothing safer, nothing more. But love is not scarce. Safety is not rare. When someone says no one will want you, what they mean is, I don't want you to want better. Scarcity is a lie used to keep you small. You don't have to believe it anymore. I wouldn't be like this if you didn't push me. You make me this way. When someone hands you their behavior as your fault, that is not honesty. That is manipulation. They are trying to make you responsible for their moods, their actions, their choices. And once you accept that, you begin to bend. You become careful, quiet. You shrink to avoid their reactions. But their behavior is not your burden. Their patterns are not your punishment. After all we've been through, you're just going to walk away. Time can become a chain. The longer you stay, the harder it feels to leave. You think, I've already invested so much, but time spent is not proof of worth. Years in a toxic space does not mean you must give it more. The past is not a contract. You can leave, even after 1 year, 5 years, a lifetime. Because what matters most is not how long it's been, but how free you feel now. Empathy is sacred, but manipulators turn it into an anchor. They say, you know how hard my life has been? You know I have issues, and suddenly their pain becomes your prison. You hesitate to speak, to leave, to say no, because you feel for them, because you know their story. But empathy does not require sacrifice. You can care and still choose yourself. You can hold compassion and still walk away. These traps are powerful because they are hidden. They live beneath the surface, in emotion, in guilt, and hope. But once you name them, they lose strength. Once you say, this is guilt, not love. This is fear, not loyalty. You create space. Space to breathe, to feel, to choose. This is where the hooks loosen, where the tether begins to fray, and in that space, you begin to return, not all at once, not without pain, but piece by piece, you reclaim your voice and step out of the trap, into your own truth. It doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with small questions. Are you sure? Did that really happen? You're being dramatic. At first, you explain. You want to be understood. But slowly, your words lose weight. Your memories become soft. You start to wonder, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm overthinking. Gaslighting doesn't erase your truth all at once. It rewrites it quietly, one page at a time. Gaslighting isn't always obvious. It doesn't need to scream to be effective. It only needs to create doubt. Doubt in your memory. Doubt in your reactions. Doubt in your sanity. They say, that's not what I said. You always twist things. You're remembering it wrong. You begin to feel lost, even when nothing is changing on the outside, because the confusion is growing inside you. The goal of gaslighting is not to convince you. It's to confuse you, to make you question your own mind, until their version feels more real than yours. And when you're confused, you're easier to control. Confusion makes you pause, makes you doubt. And while you're doubting, they are deciding what happened, what it meant, who was at fault. It's not just control of the moment. It's control of the meaning. Gaslighting often leads to isolation, not because they push others away, but because you begin to pull away. You stop sharing your thoughts because you don't trust them anymore. You stop asking for validation because you fear being wrong again. The less you speak, the less you are seen. Then slowly, you disappear inside yourself. You are still there, but distant, muted. That silence isn't peace. It's control. Sometimes they apologize, and for a moment you feel hope. I didn't mean to. I'll do better. But then it happens again. And again. The apology is not a promise. It's a pacifier. A way to soothe you, to reset the tension, to keep the cycle spinning, without actually breaking it. And because you are kind, you give them another chance. That kindness is beautiful, but they're using it. With time, gaslighting changes you. You become smaller, quieter, more uncertain. You wait to see how they feel before deciding how you feel. You look to their face before trusting your gut. You shrink from your own truth because it's been questioned too many times. This is not love, it's erasure, not all at once, but piece by piece, until the version of you that once spoke freely is barely whispering now. To the outside world, they may seem kind, charming, generous. They joke, they smile, they help. But behind closed doors, they rewrite, they reverse, they erase. This makes it harder to speak up because no one sees what you see. They wear a mask, and the world believes it, which makes you question even more. Maybe it really is me, but it isn't. You are just the only one seeing the unmasked version. Control does not always look like force. Sometimes it looks like kindness. Sometimes it feels like fear. Manipulators use two levers, fear and reward. They push one, then the other, until you move the way they want you to, like training a response, like shaping your choices, not through love, but through patterns. Segment 2, fear. The unspoken threat. Fear doesn't always scream. It whispers. What if they leave me? What if I upset them? What if I'm wrong? It comes in glances and silence, in raised eyebrows and sudden distance. You learn to avoid certain topics, to soften your words, to stay quiet when you want to speak. Not because they told you to, but because fear trained you to. This is how control begins, with hesitation. Segment 3, the punishment when you step out of line. There's always a consequence. It may not be loud. It may not be physical, but it is felt deeply. They withdraw. They criticize. They sulk. They rage. They make you feel small, guilty, wrong, until you apologize, until you surrender. The punishment is not for justice, it's for control. Segment 4, the reward then, they change. They smile, they praise. They touch your hand gently. They say, I knew you'd come around. You're the only one who understands me. And you feel seen again, loved again. That warmth, it's addictive because it only comes after the cold. It becomes something you work for, chase, hope for. And in that hope, you begin to bend. Just a little more, every time. The reward doesn't come every time. Sometimes they are cold. Sometimes they are sweet. You never know what version you will get. And that unpredictability, it makes you try harder. Because you've tasted the reward, and now you chase it. This is not love, it's conditioning, a psychological trap. where uncertainty becomes a motivator and confusion becomes a leash. The good days are real, but they are part of the cycle. They're used to reset your doubt, to keep you hopeful. See, things aren't so bad. We're just going through a rough patch. But the good days always follow the bad, and they always lead back to more confusion. This back and forth is not growth, it's entrapment. It makes you stay longer, even when you know better, because you are still waiting for the good version to return. Over time, you stop resisting, you speak less, you challenge less, you become careful, predictable, you learn what keeps the peace, you learn how to avoid the storm, and so you adjust and adapt until you are no longer acting like yourself. You are performing to stay safe, performing to earn affection. This is not a relationship, it is a stage, and you have been cast in a role you never auditioned for. The fear keeps you small, the reward keeps you close. You feel safe, but only when you obey. That is not safety, that is survival. True safety does not come with conditions or quiet terror. It comes with freedom, with peace, with the ability to be yourself without punishment. If you must shrink to stay safe, you are not safe. You are controlled. There comes a moment when you feel the shift. Something inside you says, this is not love. It's not a scream. It's not a rage. It's a whisper, but it is strong. It is the beginning of your return. You start to question the patterns. You notice the push and pull, and you begin to want more. Not just quiet, but truth. Not just comfort, but clarity. Segment 10. Breaking the cycle. You do not have to earn love. You do not have to fear to stay. You do not need to chase kindness or trade your peace for approval. Real love does not play games with fear and reward. It invites, it accepts, it nourishes. Breaking the cycle is not just about leaving them. It is about leaving the version of you that believes survival was love. It is about choosing yourself, choosing peace, choosing truth, again and again, until fear no longer leads you and reward no longer controls you. And in that choosing, you begin to live free. At first, it feels normal. You're spending more time with them, you're closer, more connected, but then slowly, your world begins to shrink. You stop seeing certain friends. You skip family events. You no longer call the people you used to. And it's not because you were told to. It's because it became easier not to. Because they made you feel like those connections weren't safe or necessary. Your friend doesn't really get us. Your sister always makes things worse. Why do you tell them everything? These words come gently, but they land sharply. You begin to second guess. You begin to feel disloyal for sharing, and so you stop. That's how it begins, not by locking you in, but by loosening every bond outside until they are the only one left. They don't just distance you from others, they start to discredit them. She's jealous of us. They just want to break us up. He never really supported you. They make your loved ones sound dangerous, unstable, wrong, and soon, when you feel doubt or pain, you no longer reach for them. You reach back to the manipulator, the very source of the pain, because they've convinced you they're the only one who truly understands. You confuse control for closeness. They just want me all to themselves. They're protective. They care so much. It feels flattering, special, but real love doesn't cage you. It doesn't cut you off. It encourages your life, your friendships, your individuality. When someone needs you to be isolated to feel secure, that is not love, that is ownership. Once you're alone, their voice gets louder. There's no one left to challenge the narrative. No mirror to reflect the truth back to you. So their version becomes your version, their moods shape your day, their approval becomes your purpose, and slowly their world becomes your only world. This is dependency. It doesn't feel like a chain, it feels like oxygen, until you try to step away, and suddenly you can't breathe.